A horse can hit 70 kilometers an hour. Your ancestor never cracked 25, so imagine that gap. The animal tears across the plain and vanishes in seconds, a blur that 1,000 generations of your family combined could never catch. He doesn't even try to keep pace. He just watches it disappear. And then he starts following it, not sprinting, walking. By nightfall, that creature is dead, and he hasn't even broken a sweat from exertion. So how does the slowest predator on the entire savanna bring down the one animal engineered to outpace everything alive, himself included? It seems straightforward. The quick animal escapes. Except that's not how it played out. For nearly all of human history, raw speed was a losing strategy, and your ancestors triumphed by opting out of that contest entirely. When researchers Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman published their findings in 2004, they identified something no other apex predator on the grasslands possessed. Something so mundane, you performed it just walking to your kitchen this morning. The animal came equipped with claws, hooves, and triple the maximum speed. Your ancestor carried one advantage hidden inside his own body, and it transformed every swift, panicked creature on that landscape into prey he could eventually run to exhaustion. Imagine a gazelle the second it notices him. It explodes into motion. One moment grazing peacefully, the next a blur of dust racing across open terrain. Speeds climbing past 40 kilometers an hour, vanish behind brush before he's managed 3 strides. The contest looks over. That's the story your eyes tell you, and for roughly 60 seconds, they're correct. Because here's the catch that gazelle faces. It cannot release heat while sprinting. Every 4-legged creature on that plain sheds warmth the same way, standing motionless, panting, expelling heat through an open mouth. But panting and galloping can't happen simultaneously. The breathing rhythm is locked to the stride. Every breath tied to every stride, meaning the instant it bolts, its only cooling mechanism switches off. The heat builds with nowhere to escape. It keeps rising. A gazelle's internal temperature can jump 4.5 degrees during a single hard run, enough to push the body beyond the threshold where organs simply fail. So it must halt, stand still, pant the excess heat away, and right as it pauses, the slow figure reappears on the horizon, still moving at the same unhurried pace. Scientists continue debating exactly how often this strategy succeeded, but the underlying mechanics are difficult to dispute. This isn't a sprint. It's a gradual takedown disguised as a chase. The animal drains its own reserves through desperate bursts, while your ancestor spends almost nothing narrowing the distance one exhausted stop at a time. Sprint, recover, sprint, recover. Only every recovery grows briefer, every burst hotter, until the overheating overwhelms it. The gazelle isn't run down. It cooks from within, its internal engine redlines until the system shuts itself off. It collapses into the grass while the hunter closes the final distance on foot and finishes the job with a stone. No claws needed, no burst of speed required, just a being that refused to quit chasing another that could no longer keep moving. But that patient walk was never the true weapon. The actual weapon was something far stranger, something unfolding inside the hunter's mind the whole time. And this is where it turns fascinating. The gazelle has vanished, crested a hill, disappeared from view entirely. No dust lingering in the air behind it. By all logical measures, the trail has gone cold. The hunter kneels down. There, in the soil, a scuff mark barely wider than a thumb. A blade of grass pressed in the wrong direction. A droplet of saliva still glistening at the edge of a hoofprint. To you, meaningless. To him, an entire narrative. And he interprets it the way you're reading this sentence right now, left to right. With total confidence, effortlessly. The animal headed this direction. It's growing fatigued. It's protecting its left side. It rested here for longer than the previous stop. He hasn't laid eyes on the gazelle since it disappeared. He doesn't need to. He isn't pursuing the animal itself. He's pursuing the narrative it's leaving behind in the earth. This is the true weapon, and it has nothing to do with his legs whatsoever. It's the interpretive mind behind it all. Long before any written language existed or numbers beyond 10 were counted, your ancestors were conducting humanity's first science, collecting evidence, forming hypotheses, forecasting where an invisible creature would end up, and confirming it with their own 2 feet. A miscalculation meant a dead trail, and the family went without food that night. So the minds that guessed correctly became the ancestors of your bloodline. And powering that entire cognitive process was a physical engine that made the whole pursuit viable. Your ancestor had lost nearly all his body hair and developed millions of microscopic pores across his skin, each one releasing moisture to strip heat away from the body as quickly as it accumulated. A cooling mechanism soaking through your shirt at the gym today, powered entirely by sweat and endurance, while the creature being hunted had nothing but an open mouth and no outlet for its rising temperature. Exposed skin, countless microscopic valves, a mind capable of reading dirt like written text. That same body belongs to you today, but your ancestors didn't settle for simply becoming ideal hunters. They transformed the terrain itself into a weapon the prey could never anticipate. And here's the piece that reshapes the whole picture. Picture the herd sprinting at full speed, 100 creatures flowing across flat ground like a river of muscle, flanked on either side by low-stacked stone barriers. They don't hesitate at the sight of it. Walls mean nothing to a fleeing gazelle. It simply races through the corridor between them, and that corridor feels exactly like open, unobstructed terrain, like freedom. Except those 2 walls are gradually converging. A kilometer further ahead, they nearly meet, and at that meeting point, invisible until the final stride, the ground vanishes into a pit deeper than a standing man. The herd doesn't stumble into an accidental trap, it runs headfirst into a structure engineered generations before any of them were born. This marks the moment the hunt stopped being a single man against a single gazelle and became something the terrain itself had memorized. Throughout the deserts of the Middle East, archaeologists have documented over 6,000 of these stone funnel structures. Some stretching for kilometers, etched permanently into the landscape and only fully visible from above. When researcher Rodemai Krassard and his team verified their purpose in 2022, the sheer scale of the discovery hit hard. These weren't simple fences or holding pens. They were engineered killing systems stretched across entire valleys, built to consume a complete herd within a single afternoon. And these aren't even the earliest examples. On an island near Japan, hunters carved rows of pits into a flat terrace and funneled animals directly into them 30,000 years ago. A killing ground built into the earth before the final ice age had even loosened its hold. Consider what that means for the prey. It could outpace the man. It could never outpace the terrain itself. By the time it was racing down that stone-lined corridor, the outcome had already been settled, decided years earlier by people who had studied its movement patterns, migration routes, and panic responses, then reshaped the land around that understanding. The gazelle possessed speed, but it was sprinting through an environment quietly redesigned to capture it, engineered by a mind that had been studying its species for 10 millennia before that specific animal ever took its first breath. Your body has no awareness that the herds vanished long ago. It doesn't register that the stone traps have crumbled into dust, that nothing remains to be hunted down anymore. It only remembers the ancient blueprint built to perspire, to track, to keep pushing forward long after everything else has been forced to quit. Here's what people overlook when picturing the caveman as evolution's weakling. He wasn't slow because he lost a foot race. He was slow because he was never competing in the contest the animal believed was happening. The gazelle overheating in a cloud of dust, the mind decoding the narrative written in the soil, the valley deliberately reshaped into a killing floor. These appear to be three separate phenomena. They're a single truth observed from three different angles. And here's the piece most people miss entirely. The animal was always engaged in the contest it could perceive. Speed, distance, the upcoming ridge. Your ancestors were engaged in an entirely different contest, invisible to their prey, built from patience and time, and the gradual reshaping of the world around a single certainty: it will exhaust itself before we do. So picture it one final time, a creature at full sprint across open terrain, faster than anything your species ever was. Every muscle straining toward the horizon and toward escape. And somewhere far behind, too distant to seem relevant, one lone figure walking. Unhurried, barely watching, simply moving forward. The way water flows toward the ocean. The animal is competing in a race. It has always been racing against the next ridge, against the fire building inside its own chest. Your ancestors never signed up for that race. They were the patience that race was measured against, and patience ultimately outlasts everything that runs.